Cool.
And we are live. Okay, so today I am joined by Mr. Monarcho-Hoppean, um, and he's compiled a list of the first 78, did you say it was?
Yep. Yep.
Yes, first 78 executive orders signed by Trump in his first couple of days in office. Um, and at least some of them are very good, but a lot of them are not so good, at least as far as I've seen. So we're just going to try to go through some of them here and discuss whether or not they're libertarian. I suppose, do you want to introduce yourself, explain what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm Monhop. What I do is basically talk shit about people on Twitter. I don't do much more than that. I don't have a YouTube channel or do anything like that. I just hang out with yourself and some of the other guys that are kicking around on Twitter and or X, I suppose, and have a bit of fun with it. So, but yeah, like I was just sitting at home one day, early knock off for work, and I didn't really have anything to do. So I was like, I don't know what I'll do. I'll look through all of Trump's executive orders and decide whether they're libertarian or not, because that's what normal people do with their spare time. But yeah, no, I'm keen to get into it. I suppose the big thing is people might be wondering why an Aussie, as I'm sure most people can figure out, either already knew about me or can figure out from my accent, I'm Australian,
Yeah, we've got an
and a
Australian
Brit
and a
cares so much
Scotsman
about
to
US
go over
politics.
these policies here.
Yeah, yeah, that was the first thing I thought of. And look, I think at the end of the day, I think people need to recognise that. I don't know what your thoughts are on Scotland, but certainly in Australia, it's a shithole, and there's not much light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to us getting anywhere as far as libertarianism goes. So, as bad as you might think the United States is. It's probably the only place, I mean, I guess alongside Argentina nowadays with Malay in office, that the United States is probably one of the only other places on the planet that has really anything going for it when it comes to libertarianism. So I think it's important for us to keep track of how things are going. And of course, at the end of the day, what the US does affects us all a great deal. So I think it's important for us to discuss this topic, even though neither of us are actually living in that country at the moment.
Mm. Indeed. I suppose I'm just wondering how we should structure it. Maybe we should structure it like a compliment sandwich, where we do start off with some good stuff before, at least before we get into the bad
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know if we'll do a proper sandwich or not. But I mean, I think the one I'm most familiar with is he gave not only just a commutation of Ulbricht's sentence, but he fully pardoned the guy, which I think is definitely a very good thing. I mean, Ross Ulbricht, he was in jail for over a decade for just bullshit reasons, and right guy's a great entrepreneur, and I think it's great to have him back in society, back where he can be productive and not locked in a cage. So that's definitely uh, the best one, at least as far as I'm aware. What would you say your thoughts on as far as freeing Ulbricht? What do you think about
Oh,
that?
it would have to be. I think it's clearly the standalone, like clear cut best thing that he's done. Because yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, he was a private individual going about literally just created a website for people to trade and use as they saw fit. And look, obviously, people did some unsavory things on there, but even if you were of the opinion that trafficking those substances, I don't want to say the wrong thing on YouTube or whatever, but doing that sort of thing is wrong or even illegal, which obviously neither of us believe. Even if you were to believe that, Ross didn't even do that. He just created a website that
Hmm.
other people chose to do that sort of thing on. So even by the standards set by the state as to what's criminal, I don't think he even met that burden. And then, I mean, look, obviously on top of that, you've just got the fact that even if he was selling kilos and kilos of narcotics. Who cares? He should be allowed to do that. So yeah, that's obviously. I think that one probably stands out as the one that's like not even remotely debatable. If you get what I mean, like there's others that are kind of like, yeah, that's pretty good, but there's also this potential negative associated with it. But that one's obviously just a clear cut. Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfect. We love that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would like to note on the front of Ulbricht that it seems that a lot of the neo-prags are trying to set it up in such a way where, well, he freed Ulbricht, so then everything else is fine, and that justifies post hoc everything, our entire strategy and everything. It's like, I do think it's important to not jump the shark too much on that. It is a good thing that Ulbricht was freed, and everybody should celebrate that. I know I was celebrating it quite hard, but that is a one-time good thing from Trump, because I mean he's still trying to, he's in like another breath he'll say that he wants to go to war with Mexico to kill off drug dealers. It's a little bit,
yeah, exactly.
This is not like
exactly.
Trump is therefore a big libertarian.
It's not a paradigm shift as far as Trump's stance on drugs or the Republican stance on drugs. It's not that at all. It's I mean, as we said, like the fact is he didn't deal drugs. So arguably the reason he got freed is because the people who were pushing for it were able to convince him that actually he didn't commit the quote unquote crime that he was accused of. So yeah, no, I think at the end of the day you need to ask those people who are touting this as like a huge libertarian win that makes everything worth it. If Biden had freed Ross as one of his last few pardons, but you know how he did all those pardons right before he left office, like he pardoned like Fauci and those guys. If Ross Ulbricht had been among those pardons, would you have suddenly proclaimed Joe Biden's presidency to be a successful libertarian presidency? And I think the resounding answer would have been no, because at the end of the day, it's one man's life, and that's something that we should celebrate. And he should be, and him and his family should celebrate that for the rest of their lives. But in the grand scheme of things, when you look at how much influence the president has, like it is just one man's life at the end of the day, and we should celebrate that. But that is what it is.
I think maybe I am more optimistic on it than you are. I do think it is an incredibly positive sign beyond the fact that it gets him out of prison, because it's a signal that, like, hey, libertarians are in politics here, because now everybody's hearing the name Ross Ulbricht for the first time, with like an actual libertarian base behind him going like, no, this guy is based, which is obviously going to be very interesting to people. And it shows that, like, hey, the spoiler effect is being taken seriously now. If the LP, because to be clear, I do believe that it was the Libertarian Party who were able to convince Trump to do this. It is that demonstrates that, hey, the LP is actually making moves now, which is a very positive thing. So, I mean, even if that's going to be the only accomplishment of the Mises Caucus, which I don't see them having a whole lot of growth beyond this point. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe they'll get somebody really charismatic like Clint Russell in, and rocket up to the presidency or something. But even if that is their only accomplishment that they ever get, it'll still be a whole lot more than what the old Prags ever did. So there is something to be said for that.
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to give credit where it's due, and I've been one of the most critical people of that kind of school of thought online, at least. But I can give credit where it's due. I think Angela really pushed hard for that. Angela McArdle, that is, and she got it done. So, yeah, credit where it's due, I suppose. But I'm still, skeptical of how much the party will be able to go on to achieve. But who knows? Hopefully I'm wrong. That's what I'll say. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Mhm.
But yes, but if you want to get stuck into some of this other stuff,
Absolutely.
I can start off with the article kind of gets divided into categories. So you've got your immigration and US border stuff, which I think you kind of have an idea of how that might go in terms of how pro-libertarian it is. Then you've got international trade, business and the economy, climate, energy and the environment, and then lastly, diversity, transgender rights, civil rights. Oh, I'm sorry, there's also federal workers and government structures. So I was just thinking we might leave the border stuff till later because we can kind of go through that. But given what you said about kind of doing the compliment sandwich, right? That's going to be a whole lot of not compliments. So we can start with international trade, maybe business and the economy, and kind of look through some of those policies and discuss it. What do you think?
Sure.
Sounds good. All right. So the first one that's listed under that section is it states that Trump wants to broadly direct all executive agencies to tailor their policies to reduce consumer prices. And he wants a progress report from top White House economic advisor every 30 days as to how that is going. Now, I put that under mixed, the reason being that, look, obviously prices going down isn't a bad thing. If it's done the right way, we would want to see price deflation, I suppose, as libertarians. But what I'm very skeptical of is the manner in which a White House executive would set about doing that. Given the central planning aspect of it and everything, I think it's much more likely that they're going to propose some sort of price control or some other kind of regulation to try and curb prices, rather than do the libertarian or the Austrian means of deregulating to encourage competition to reduce prices. And certainly, they're not going to go down the genuinely base route of destroying the Federal Reserve and destroying inflation that way.
Yeah. Do I believe for 1 second that, because I mean, all this executive order, based on what you said, is they just direct these agencies to reduce prices. So it sounds like these agencies are going to have a whole lot of discretionary power. So do I believe for 1 second that all of these agencies are going to get together and be like, hey guys, let's burn all these law books that we have here to to let the free market come in? No, I don't. I don't believe for a second that bureaucrats are going to be going, yep, let's get rid of our entire job, which is their job is to sit in an office and come up with new ways to fucking fuck you up the ass. That's their entire job.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that we're going to get any bureaucrats in these agencies who are going to like get rid of the Fed or anything like that. That would be, it would have to be stated in the executive order, hey, I, Donald Trump, say that gold is the only valid currency now. Boom, something like that. Or you can now exchange your dollars 1-to-1 for gold. Something like that.
Yeah, no, the bureaucrats are going to set about putting themselves and their employees out of a job by encouraging deregulation and encouraging opening up the economy. So, I think that sounds good on paper, will turn out to be counterproductive. So
it'd be like,
probably
imagine,
more anti than mixed, but
yeah, because imagine if instead the policy said Trump wants to direct executive agencies to raise consumer prices. Because I mean, there's gonna be at least some products where their price is artificially low, because they've got some sort of subsidy or something. And would we believe that what he means by I want you to raise prices is, oh yeah, of course we just get rid of these subsidies? No, it's gonna be some sort of central planning bullshit.
yeah, it'll do a full FDR and just start burning crops to raise the price of them. Yeah, so I mean that's probably just about it for that one, I suppose. Onto I suppose a good one is that he wants to suspend US participation in the global tax deal, which is an international agreement intended to set a minimum corporate tax rate globally to prevent multinational corporations from avoiding taxation altogether. Now, obviously, based We don't want a global tax deal. We want multinational corporations to be avoiding tax as much as possible. However, they need to do that. So I suppose the hope is that he suspends that participation and he drops the US corporate tax rate to lower than other countries, and that encourages competition, I suppose, or just reduces the amount of theft that's going on in the United States, I suppose.
Yeah, it would literally like, I mean, I've said this way back when like Brexit was being talked about. It would literally be so fucking easy to run a country and make it really, really, really wealthy. Like, you know, the UK could have done this when Brexit was being announced. Just literally take every single one of your regulations, all of your corporate taxes and whatnot, and just say, all right, these are no longer valid, and burn them in a big pile, and nobody has to talk about them anymore, and nobody has to obey them. And like, you know, the United Kingdom, if they'd done that back in Brexit, we would be definitely the wealthiest country in Europe by quite a margin by now. Like it's very easy to do these things. So hopefully, what the US will do is become like fucking a massive place for business to be done. It already is more so than most places on Earth. But imagine if you had the US, but with like fucking Hong Kong levels of how easy it is to set up a business, right? That would be incredible. And even that wouldn't be the ideal, but that would be like, they'd be so fucking wealthy. And hopefully they'd also stop debasing all the currency at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I think I think that becoming a tax haven is one of the best ways to grow your economy. So I think it's a profoundly good idea. Hopefully, it's being done for the purposes of lowering the American corporate tax rate, but I suppose that'll have to come at some point down the line. I'm sure he's planning on it. That's the one thing that Trump always seems to want to do is pass some kind of tax cut. So look, it's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but hopefully it's another step in the right direction. One thing I was really interested to talk about is this TikTok ban. So, or the one that was enforced and then for all of 30 seconds and then suspended again. So so he passed this executive order to suspend the US ban on TikTok for 75 days. And apparently it says specifically barring the Attorney General from enforcing the law Congress passed in 2024. And he wants that sounds good, right? You basically, obviously, if you want to download the Chinese spyware and freely associate with it, that's your right. I mean, I do it, so I can't really talk, but absolutely.
But you're an Australian, so that's like basically a vassal of China at this point anyway, so not as big as a deal for you.
Yeah, so I don't really, I don't stand to lose all that much from it, I suppose. We're already in debt to the hilt with these Belt and Road initiatives, so we'll be fine. So this is the catch comes in when he says to allow the new administration to assess national security concerns with the app and seek a potential American buyer for the digital platform. So obviously, initially, first clause, first sentence you read, great. We're repealing this ban on TikTok, allowing people to use the app if they want to. Second half, we're saying that there's potential national security risks, which could lead to them saying that, well, you can only stay unbanned if you change how your app runs according to our specific desires, or perhaps even more, an even greater imposition would be that they say that we're going to centrally plan who owns TikTok and demand that you sell a portion, maybe more than 50% of the company to some American company if you want to stay active in the United States.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, like, this whole TikTok ban, I don't buy any of these national security things with it. Because like it just screams like trade war bullshit where they're trying to give priority to US companies, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, But aren't all of like TikTok's servers and everything for the US market? They're run by Oracle. Like Oracle is basically running TikTok in the US. So like, why would you care then that some of the money is then going back to China? It's got to just be a trade war thing, right? You don't want any of the money to go to China. You're concerned about fucking China hacking into you, and you're concerned about China getting money. But like, then just be, at least be honest about that. Just say, hey, we don't like the Chinese are getting money. We want made in America apps. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so just a quick look. So I've just looked it up. So they have them in the data centers are in Northern Virginia and Hillsborough, Oregon. And then you also got one in Dublin, over in Ireland. So not too far from you. We've got
Nope, you have lagged out.
some in Norway, Singapore, and Malaysia. So I'm
Okay.
Singaporean. Hello?
All right, yeah, I think we're back now. I think I lagged out for a second
Hello?
there. You're back.
We're back. We're good.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So did you hear what I was
Yeah, they've got them in
talking
the
about? Yeah.
US,
So
then Ireland, then Singapore.
we've got so US, Singapore, Norway, Malaysia. So nothing in China. The funniest part that I just thought of while you were talking was that this, because you mentioned like trade wars and how countries think it's a good idea to reduce trade deficits or whatever. By that logic, by that like kind of mercantilist position, TikTok is great because it's primarily used by Americans with American content creators. So if it is owned by Chinese companies, those Chinese companies are sending money to Americans with with their the TikTok creators being mostly American or mostly Western at the very least. Those content creators are obviously making money off of posting stuff on the app. So yeah, they're sending money to the United States. So from that perspective, I suppose you could argue that it should be considered a good thing from an American standpoint if you buy into that narrative on trade deficits and wanting to be on the better side of the ledger, allegedly, when it comes to trade policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you could think of it like the US is exporting a bunch of content to China and China's paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the US or even Australia or the UK, wherever is yeah, exactly right. We're sending over our content to them and influencing them potentially with our particular narratives or our content, and then they're sending us money in return. So that is certainly one way to look at it, and that would be a pro mercantilist position, I suppose. But yeah, and so lastly, on kind of this pro front when it comes to trade policy, is that I don't know why this falls under. They're banning US government officials for pushing social media companies to combat misinformation and disinformation. So previous efforts to do so, to demand that companies combat misinformation, disinformation, infringe on the constitutionally protected rights of American citizens, specifically obviously free speech, and advance the government's preferred narrative and significant matters of public debate. So I think that's good. We want to see, you're allowed to spread whatever misinformation or disinformation you want to on the internet. That's kind of the key point. So even if it is false, you're allowed to say whatever you want. But we also, I suppose, perhaps even more importantly, we don't want the government to be the one that is entitled to set the narrative on what is true and false, because although we will see that that comes up again in Trump's policies and not in a good way in some of his other prescriptions, but at least for this one, it's a good thing that Trump's saying, look, we don't want the government to be setting their narrative about what the truth is or is not on certain important topics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, can you just pause before the next thing. I'm just gonna turn my VPN off real quick because I'm getting like some dropped frames every now and then. I will drop. Hello.
Yep, I can. Yep,
All right.
you're good.
Cool.
Good. I can hear you. All good. Are we back?
Yes. Hopefully, I won't have any more lagging issues now.
That would be phenomenal. Yeah, so if you want to go through, so obviously there's a lot of like kind of bad stuff that he's done on the business and the economy and stuff. We can kind of get into that stuff now if you want. So um, so the first one is what I was kind of talking about just before with trade deficits and stuff. He's going to direct the Treasury and Commerce secretaries to examine the causes of US trade deficits, which is just, well, it's just people wanting to trade certain amounts for others certain amounts. I don't know. That's a weird one. And then identify unfair trade practices and make recommendations, potentially including a global supplemental tariff. What do you think of that one, Zulu?
So, global supplemental tariff, that would mean just a tariff on every country then.
Yep, pretty much. That's what I'm getting. At the very least, you would have thought from these countries where there's alleged trade deficits happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously retarded. Like, let's take. This is what tariffs are really. The ideology behind it is better if we make things at home than abroad. Okay, let's take this seriously. You know, let's say you're in northern Alaska and you want a banana. You want to make some banana bread. Are you gonna want some U.S. made banana bread? Well, I mean, those are commie foreign states. We don't want to deal with those states. So we're gonna have only Alaskan bananas. And good luck getting an Alaskan banana. Or you know, go even further. You know, if I'm not making it in literally my own house, then the guys down the road, they're going to be robbing me whenever I trade with them. They're going to be robbing me. Silly. I need to bring those jobs into my own house and make everything myself and live as a bare subsistence farmer. What all of these sorts of arguments don't understand is comparative advantage. It's that it benefits both me and the Colombian banana farmer. Take an example. I don't know if they make bananas in Colombia. Benefits both of us that the Colombian is doing that, and then I can do things that I'm good at in things which are good for this climate. Right? You want to have labor moving towards wherever it's going to be most value productive, and having the production take place wherever it's most value productive. And tariffs are artificially pushing resources, pushing capital to where it's less value productive, which you're going to produce less value by definition.
Well, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. And they don't even achieve what they're allegedly designed to achieve, which is obviously, you know, Trump wants to do it because of job growth within the United States. Of course, it ends up being a net negative for job growth because, you know, let's say that his steel tariffs under the first administration, you know, there was a few more jobs created in the steel industry because obviously local steel companies in the United States, you know, increased their production. But of course, that was counterbalanced by a significant amount by the amount of jobs lost by the price of steel going up. And obviously, steel is an input in pretty much every sector of the economy. So all the other companies that didn't actually produce steel themselves, but rather used steel as some kind of input, whether they were car manufacturers, whatever they were doing, those companies got considerably worse off, and as a result, they had to lay off their own workers because, prices went up, and input costs went up, so they had to find some way to cut costs, and it was the workers in those businesses that suffered. So it doesn't even achieve what Trump wants it to achieve, and beyond that, obviously, it's bad economic policy.
Mm-hmm. It's like the thing you mentioned there. It's Bastiat's The Seen and the Unseen, or if people are aware of the broken window fallacy, where, well, if some kid comes along and throws a brick through the baker's window, this is a good thing. This clearly is brilliant for everybody involved, because now the window maker gets a job. But what the idiot Keynesian mystic economist doesn't understand is that, well, now the baker can't spend that money elsewhere. There's opportunity cost involved, and in this case, real monetary cost involved in the fact that now somebody else is missing a job. It's literally destroying, capital here. Destroying capital is not a way to make wealth. And so another aspect to the seen and the unseen, there's obviously the fact that, well, now other businesses are going to, and other people in the economy are going to be making less because they have to pay more for goods. And obviously the foreign businesses are also going to be worse off now, which I think they probably care less about. But it's also the fact, it's also like why did all these businesses go offshore to China in the first place? Well, there are a few reasons. I think, labor's cheap over there for sure. But also labor is in some ways artificially expensive over in the West, because they have things like the minimum wage, they have things like health regulations, they have things like worker regulations, all these extra costs involved in hiring a native worker in the West, then shipping off to China. Like, you're encouraging extra businesses to go offshore and then trying to implement a tariff to punish those businesses for going offshore. It's, instead of carrot and a stick, it's stick and a stick. I'll beat you with the stick if you don't allow me to beat you with the stick. It's insane.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can remember it happening when, everyone was hooking it up more than a decade ago, when the last two companies that produced cars in Australia, Holden and Ford, ended up going overseas entirely, and everyone was complaining about how shitty it is that that they're going overseas, and they're not, and all those workers are going to lose their job. And it's like, well, dude, the demands that you have for your job, and they're like, we want $100,000 a year salary with 4 weeks paid annual leave and everything like that. When these workers overseas will work for such a much smaller amount than that, and that's treated as like a bad thing, when it's like, well, maybe your demands are just completely outsized relative to how much value you produce.
Yeah, absolutely. And
but yeah,
people also just don't understand how much they're being robbed of with all these tariffs. Like, they could be having
that's
Chinese,
exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
like Chinese EVs, electric vehicles, are super cheap. They could be paying like 10 grand for a car, an electric vehicle with like full self-driving, and or like one of those little mini trucks which they banned in the US, or effectively banned because they aren't right for the environmental regulations going on. All of these super cheap products that you're no longer getting. Like, it's not just, oh, should the jobs be a Chinese job or should they be an American job, and I'll get the same thing either way. No, you won't get the same thing either way, right? That's the point, is that people have already demonstrated they preferred the Japanese car, or they preferred the Chinese fucking LED sign, right? They've already demonstrated that they prefer those things. So you're forcing them to go for the less efficient, less productive, worse products that they've already rejected whenever you have a tariff implemented. Like, it's really a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to get into that as well. It's people truly underestimate how bad tariffs actually are when it comes down to it, and we can get into how Trump is going tariff crazy with everything. But just real quick, just to kind of illustrate that. So I was looking recently, or it just cropped up like the Toyota Tundra, which is some car that obviously. Toyota produces it has just recently been is coming to Australia now. They're just about to release it in Australia. In the US, that car costs 40,000 US dollars for one of those vehicles, which off the top of my head, I would say probably maybe
Like
$70,000 Australian.
Australian.
If I Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's basically Zimbabwean currency at this point. But yeah, so kind of like roughly about $70,000. You would have thought, purely based on the currency conversion, right?
Mhm.
But the actual price of a Toyota Tundra in Australia is going to be 155,000 Australian dollars. So it's double the price, even after you've accounted for the discrepancy in the value of the currencies. It's going to be double the price in Australia than it is in the United States, and that's because we have all these kind of import taxes. We have like luxury vehicle taxes where like you have to pay extra tax to purchase a vehicle that's over a certain amount of money. So I can recall at one point when my mum and dad were actually shopping for a car, and they made really, really sure that they could get this car for exactly $60,000 or under, because anything over that, and all of a sudden this luxury car tax kicks in, which is just absurd. And car companies are like, well, we want to charge 62,500 for this car, but if we're being forced basically to charge less, and it makes it less profitable for us to sell cars in this country, because people won't buy the car if it's just over $60,000 because of this exorbitant luxury vehicle tax that Australia imposes. But to get to this, like these other tariffs, so just to give people an idea of how bad this could be, um, is Trump wants to renegotiate the North America Free Trade Agreement in 2026, or perhaps sooner. And in the meantime, he wants to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods as of Feb 1, so as of tomorrow. Now, he hasn't actually, it says he hasn't actually signed that executive action. I'm going to have to quickly look whether he has or not, but let's say he is intending on doing that. Then you also have his establishment of the External Revenue Service to collect tariffs, duties, and other foreign trade-related revenues. And then he wants to get into this trade war with China, and he's threatening tariffs as high as 60%. So we're talking about tariffs, between 25 to 60% on literally the US's three biggest import partners. China, Mexico, and Canada are 1, 2, and 3, and they're 1, 2, and 3 by a significant margin. Like Japan's number 4, and they only import, and then the US only imports a quarter of the amount as it does of Canada, who is third. So Trump's basically looking at nuking trade with the US's three biggest trade partners, and that is just going to be absolutely awful for US citizens if that were to actually take place.
Mhm. Yeah, because I mean, we were talking before about how do we believe that Trump's going to be like turning the U.S. into some like deregulated haven or anything? Like, I mean, this talk about tariffs is exactly why I don't believe that this is what he's going for. He could very easily turn the U.S. into some fucking backwater that nobody gives a shit about. 'Cause, I mean, all these people, it's just a rejection of cause and effect. You can't just have any old person running these businesses, right? It's not that any old person can just make Toyota cars, right? It took the people of Toyota to make those cars. You can't just have some random fucking guy in Dearborn, Michigan, coming around with like, oh yes, and I'll make them now. Like, no, that's not how it works. There were some great U.S. car manufacturers, but I mean, it's kind of funny because at the same time, these people who are like, no, bring all the jobs back to the U.S., they're also complaining about how all the U.S. companies are full of DEI hires and whatnot. So it's like, are those the people you trust to be making your cars? Like literally just get rid of the regulations. I'm sure there can be some good U.S. manufacturers if you do that. But let the consumer decide. Give them actual competition, including abroad competition. If they've got that, then you get some proper American industrialism, like how we saw in ye olden days. How I'm thinking of the example of can't recall the guy's name at the moment. No, I can't remember his name. He was like a bromine and chemical salesman. And
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, he like outcompeted an entire like European cartel where they had all of Europe under their thumb. He was just some guy, and they started like selling really cheap bromine in the US to price him out. And so he would just buy up this bromine and start selling it off in Europe to fuck with them.
Yeah.
Like you can get stuff like that if
all
you
their bromine and reselling it.
yeah. And imagine if that guy had instead he went to the government and said, "Hey, you gotta put a tariff on all this German bromine." Well, then he never would have improved. Right? You just get stagnation like that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Yeah, and to your point, and this is you kind of mentioned how these pro-tariff people will harken back to the good old days where the US didn't have any kind of income tax or any other taxes like that, and they allegedly used to entirely rely on tariffs for all of their government income. First of all, we need to recognize the US government was tiny in those days compared to what it is now. So they didn't need very much a very high tariff to subsidize its entire existence. But perhaps more importantly, like you can't just it's a post hoc rationalization. It's like, well, we had tariffs then, and the US was really good then, so therefore the tariffs caused us to be really good, and that's obviously just poor logical reasoning. But it's also worth recognizing that the world was a very different place then, and the US probably was just in a purely free market sense. It made more sense to produce more stuff within your own country because of how expensive it used to be to transport stuff internationally. Like, you had to send stuff on a cargo ship for 3 months just to get it anywhere. If you're in the United States, so it probably did make sense in those days. Like it was just simply the fact was most likely. I probably haven't done enough research into this to say this for certain. This is more of a guess, I suppose, or maybe not a guess, but an educated guess, maybe we might say, that at the end of the day, the tariffs had less impact on a country's economy because there was just less international trade going on then relative to what there is now. So it's not that the tariffs were some brilliant thing that caused all this economic growth. It's just that you had a much smaller state back at that point, so the tariffs didn't need to be very high. And B, there was just less international trade going on than what there is now. So it had less influence over a country and how it ended up operating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I was watching a comedy, a stand-up DVD earlier today. Sean Locke's Purple Van Man, and he was talking about how he was looking at the labels of all his clothes, and he realized that if it wasn't for China, he'd be naked. That's true.
Yeah.
There's like that clip of Tim Pool going off about tariffs. I believe it was Jeremiah Harding of all people pointed out like, okay, his microphone was made in China, his shirt was made in China, the beanie was made in China, fucking all this shit was made in China. My microphone's Rode, probably made in China. Like all this shit's made in China. I don't know. Rode's a European company, I believe, but who knows where the fuck they manufacture this shit. My webcam was definitely made in China.
Who
Monitors
would
were
be
made in China.
watching? How many people would be watching Tim Pool if they didn't have an iPhone made in China, right?
Yeah.
Like he wouldn't have very many viewers if no one had iPhones, which are all made in China. So
Or all the
yeah, no, it's a very very
all the
very silly
network
idea.
infrastructure which you need to run the internet in the first place. Like a lot of the shit's made in China.
Yeah, yeah. You can go on with it, and it kind of just goes to show how ridiculously short-sighted people are. The really really scary one, and this is actually isn't covered um, in this round of executive orders, but when Trump was talking about semiconductor tariffs, and I'm like, shit, like what you want the US to produce all its own semiconductors rather than just going to the world the literally the country of semiconductors that is Taiwan, and then suddenly make Taiwan more pro China rather than pro US. Like what a ridiculous thing to do.
Yeah, because I mean, semiconductors is an interesting one because I believe I did some research on TSMC a little bit ago for the iPhone video that I did. They do have a manufacturing plant in Texas. So, I mean, maybe his idea is, hey, Mr. TSMC, build more manufacturing plants in the US, which, like, I mean, it's still central planning. I mean, at least TSMC would still be making some money because, I mean, they really are just the best at fabricating semiconductors. And it's a very complex process, and this is another area where it's like, no, it's not just anybody who can do it. If you want the best semiconductors, you're going to TSMC, no matter who you are. Apple's buying from TSMC, Nvidia's buying from TSMC. If you've got a microchip, dollars to donuts, TSMC made that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like you're gonna stop imports from them and then suddenly Bud and Bill from in a shed in Kentucky are gonna start producing semiconductors. That's not gonna happen. You're just gonna get more expensive semiconductors.
I mean, one way they might try to do
happen.
something like competing with TSMC is if Trump just said, okay, all intellectual property, patents and copyrights are revoked right now. And then maybe somebody in the US would be able to start copying TSMC patents. They've probably got patents, right? Most of these big companies have patents. Maybe that would help people out a little bit. But I still think that TSMC...
I mean, that would be incredible if you did do that.
Yeah. Like, it would still take, like, decades to build up something to the point where it could actually, like, compete with TSMC for these big contracts. Like, everybody knows and trusts TSMC. They've been doing it forever. It would take you literally decades, even without patents, to build something where, Apple starts going to you for their chips instead of TSMC. So it's not going to be like a short-term thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely not. Well, that kind of covers it off for that kind of the trade section, because we went through the good stuff, and obviously we covered off kind of the tariff aspect of it, which I think is a really, really, really important topic to cover, because I've seen a lot of libertarians saying, oh, well, if Trump does go about abolishing the income tax, but he raises tariffs, then surely that's a win. And it's like, well, you got to remember how much stuff you get from outside the United States, because it's pretty much everything that you own. And the idea that, oh, well, your income's going to be, you're going to get 100% of your income. Well, yeah, but that's going to be offset by how much more expensive everything's going to be. And I don't really believe that you're likely to come out ahead in that scenario. I don't think you can just tip the scales towards one form of taxation over another and expect to come out ahead.
Mm-hmm. It's also
onto this.
It's also implicitly accepting as valid a package deal. So introducing a tariff and revoking the income tax, those are two different actions which you can't analyze them at the same time. Like, I can't say, would it be good if I stopped taxing you and I punched you in the face? It's like, whoa, hold on. Those are two different things, right? You can't have them both. because it's like, let's use it in a different area to get out of the legal stuff. It's like, you know, do you like chocolate ice cream, which of course implies that you love getting raped. It's like, whoa, hold on, I do like chocolate ice cream. Oh, so you like getting raped? It's like, no, what the hell, right? You can't just link these things together. It's a very subtle sort of error, a very good way that people use to sneak premises past you. So you should never, in any discussion, not even one time, should you allow someone to present you a package deal and say, yep, there's your package deal, good or bad. It's like, no.
Yeah.
I won't accept this. So inserting tariffs is a bad thing. Abolishing taxation, that's a good thing. Those are the answers, because you have to have answers to two questions.
Multiple, yeah, exactly. And it's also a implicitly, maybe even not just implicitly, but it's an acceptance of central planning in a sense. At the very least, it is if you're saying that, well, it's worth it to increase tariffs if we abolish taxation, income tax. You're implicitly accepting the notion that you can compare those two things in an economic sense, and of course you can't. Value is not value is subjective, and it's not comparable between people. So you can't just say, well, yeah, I can just assert, I can just calculate that, you know, this the increase in tariffs is not fully offset, or is more than fully offset by a decrease in income tax or the abolition of income tax. It's like, well, that's not knowable with respect to as far as economics go. So even setting aside kind of the legal aspect to it that you kind of touched on there, just on an economic level, it doesn't make sense to claim that you know, tariffs are somehow better than income tax. Like, it's not saying that we're capable of knowing in one respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is similar also
yeah,
to,
so
potentially provide a segue into Monsieur Borders here. Depending on how long that'll be, I suppose. It's similar to, or at least it'll foreshadow it, let's say that. So you can either do it now or later. It's similar to how, like, you know, these so-called Hoppians, who maybe read something that Hoppe said, and they're like, oh, that kind of sounds like what I'm saying, so therefore Hoppe's saying the same thing. I'm just doing aggressive air quotes here because I don't believe any of them actually have the same position as Hoppe on Borders. So where they'll be like, oh, well, if it's clearly better to have, you know, the public road managed in a certain way, or the public park managed in a certain way, we can manage it as if it was private property. No. You can't do that.
You can't do that.
If you could do that, then, well, gee whiz, the Soviet Union comes along and they say, well, hey guys, we're Hoppians too. We're going to manage all of this public property as if it was private property. And don't you worry about it, because we're going to manage it just like it was private property, except there aren't any prices involved. All of these Hoppians, they would all be screaming about how, no, you can't manage something as if it's private property without it being private property. You can't run the government like it was a business. Not possible to do. And that applies also to the public park. The literal only way that you know whether it's good to have red road signs or yellow road signs or white road signs or whatever the hell else, the only way you can know that is by allowing prices. So literally, right this second, immediately, the government should say, have at it. Go ahead and take public property. We're not going to stop you anymore. And then, of course, these Schrodinger's homeless people, who are, as we all know, really lazy bums who do nothing. But the second this happens, they're going to be like right there at the White Office press office there, White House press office, and they're going to be right on that. They're going to, oh my god, the order was just signed, guys. Quick, get to work. And they're going to do like a big Fires of Gondor thing to alert all the homeless men that they've got to really mobilize now and take control of all this public property with their no resources. Let's even say that does happen somehow. Well, what's going to happen immediately after that is somebody's going to go up to the Central Park homeless community and they're going to say, hey, I'm going to give you $10 million for Central Park. They say, oh, deal. And then they go off and smoke $10 million worth of meth or something. Like, this is the point. It would be allocated towards people who want it most because there'd now be a market for it. This is just the same point as what Austrians make about how we should go into a bust right now. It's good to go into a bust because then resources get reallocated to where they need to be. So, yeah, there'd be a bust. There'd be a bust with respect to how this public property is being managed. I don't think that day one, Central Park is going to be managed the best it could be if the government just said, go ahead and take it. But day 1000, going to be a whole lot better than it is now. You need to go through that bust so that property can go where it needs to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to touch on, we can get into borders, we can get into immigration and border policy if you want now, because we've kind of started touching on it enough now that I think it's worth just diving into. Going back on your point earlier where you talked about taking package deals, that's a that's a thing that I noticed even in the discussion that cropped up before I went to bed earlier when I was talking to our good friend Jacob. When I was asked, when we were talking about how a common kind of position that they'll take is that, well, if you have open borders, then the welfare state's going to increase because allegedly all these poor people are going to come across the border and they're all going to demand welfare payments to food stamps or whatever else to keep themselves alive, and then so the amount of welfare we're getting paid is going to go up. I think that's another example of them demanding that you accept a package deal. It's like, well, no, the US's stance on borders and its enforcement of border restrictions is a different policy to the policy of giving people welfare. So you can't say, well, the US shouldn't. The US should have border policy because of welfare. It's exactly what you said. It's like, well, the US saying, well, we have to have tax you, otherwise we'll punch you in the face more. It's like, well, those are two different things. I don't have to accept taxation. I don't have to accept state borders just because I also don't want welfare. It's a silly starting point to come from, that you're demanding that I accept this package deal just because, whatever, that might be how it ends up playing out if it were to happen.
It's like, this is an argument that Ace makes a lot, which is, okay, well, let's take this package deal. Fine, we're going to allow that sort of package dealing. Well then, how come we aren't in favor of birth regulations, birth restrictions? Why don't we implement a one-child policy or a zero-child policy? Because you know who, like, a really fucking big consumer of welfare is? It's fucking kids. It's families. How much do you think it costs to send a kid through public school, which they're probably going to be going through? A whole shit ton of money. That's how much it costs. How much are all these child benefits costing? A whole shit ton of money. So why the hell aren't these same people saying, yeah, no, of course, we should ship all the children off to Guantanamo Bay, like how we're doing with the immigrants now. It's just a blatant inconsistency.
Mandated abortion. Hoppean style state mandated abortions. That's what we want. But yes, so to get into some of his actual executive orders, so the first one that they mention is he's designating an invasion across the southern border of the United States. And that is obviously a bad thing for him to say, but on top of that, it triggers certain executive powers, which allows him to repeal, repatriate, or remove any illegal alien engaged in the invasion. yeah, so that's kind of the starting point. He's basically doing the, obviously George Bush had the war on terror. We had the war on drugs, and now we've got the war on immigration. So I'm sure that one will go just as well as the others did.
Yeah, and of course, all these guys like Dave Smith who keeps saying how, oh, we would have been so good on the war on drugs and the war on terror if we were really popular back in the day. Of course, all of them have really instantly recognized how terrible it is that there's going to be a war on immigration now. They've all recognized that this is clearly not going to go well, or have they?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like they have. It seems like these people who keep hampering on about how the libertarians were right about the Patriot Act, because of course libertarians were, and now they're saying let's militarize the U.S. border. What do you mean Trump's militarizing the border?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Jesus Christ, this is Dave Smith's exact. In fact, this is actually lighter than what Dave Smith ideally wants as his policy proposal.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just gonna keep hampering on Dave Smith because I hate the man. So he his actual policy proposal is verbatim, and in fact, it's worse than this. I'll get into this. His policy proposal verbatim is that he wants to take the entire fucking military and put them on our border and secure our border. Now, what does that mean in terms of a policy proposal? Because you're not going to write that in an executive order and sign off on it. And that means taking the US military and putting them within the 100-mile border exclusion zone, and enacting martial law in that exclusion zone. That's what Dave Smith wants. He wants to destroy capitalism. And I think that's enough to disqualify him as a libertarian. But hey, that's just me. And he even says beyond that his actual feelings are stronger than that. He wants a policy stronger than that. But he's not allowed to say it on these shows that he does. So this is absurd and crazy. And he says that he doesn't care if this violates the NEP, because he's still going to, then he'll just drop the NEP if it gets proven to him that this violates the NEP. So that's why I really don't believe that this guy's a fucking libertarian. Even though there's a bunch of people, namby-pamby retards, in my comments of the Dave Smith edit that I did, who think like, oh, well, I agree with all this. Well, you shouldn't. This is disqualifying as a libertarian. He is not a libertarian. I think he'll probably never be a libertarian. This is saying you want to enact martial law in the US and you don't care if it violates the non-aggression principle. That's disqualifying. Like, sorry, you're out. That's just how it is.
100%. 100%. But yeah, that segues nicely into the next topic, the next point, which is actually what I would like to call the Dave Smith, the executive order, the Dave Smith executive order, let's call it, which is to allow US military service members to act as immigration and border enforcement officers as part of Trump's promised mass deportation program. So that's literally exactly what Dave Smith wants. He wants to put our entire military on the border. So Dave Smith's gotten what he wants. He's got the military on the border. He's got the reopening of Gitmo to deport them all to. It's going really, really well from a libertarian perspective, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Because this is the libertarian perspective, guys. I'll just put this tweet on the screen.
We love Guantanamo Bay.
We really, what we libertarians really want is to send a bunch of people to Guantanamo Bay, because they weren't born in the US and they came here illegally, guys. This is clearly the Hoppean position. This is what physical removal means. Hoppe says physical removal, so that clearly must mean the same thing here. If we're just going to take like whatever the fuck we want, Hoppe to mean, then sure, whatever. And physical removal, it means the government can do whatever they want. And they're managing. Clearly, the private property owners, if they were allowed to manage this private property, they would all start sending immigrants to Guantanamo Bay. This is clearly what private property owners would do, in spite of the fact that plenty of these private property owners are trying to hire these immigrants. They'd all send them off to Guantanamo Bay if they had their choice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like a lot of these different executive orders are just going to be different kind of policies as far as the border situation goes. So, like, I'm not going to cover all of them because we kind of just be covering the same territory and going over the same thing about how bad it is. So, the one interesting one I did want to bring up, though, is this birthright citizenship thing. So, Trump wants to redefine birthright citizenship to make it more restrictive. So, i.e., less people are entitled to it. So he's basically saying that now a child born in the US will not be a citizen if the mother does not have legal immigration status, or the father is not a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident. So if neither of those categories are met, then even if you're born in the United States, you're not going to be automatically granted citizenship. So
Did he actually word it as an
this is
or?
being done. Oh, sorry, it's an
Okay.
and. Sorry. If the mother does not have legal immigration status and the father is not a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident. Yeah, sorry. That does change it quite significantly. Yeah, so it's an and. So that you have to have both. Yeah, neither your mother nor father have to be um, a a citizen or a permanent resident in order for that to take place. So obviously this is being done with bad intentions as far as we're concerned. Obviously Trump is intending to use this as a means to deport people because obviously you can't deport citizens. So if they're not a citizen, then he can deport them. But the actual policy itself of making fewer people citizens, I think ultimately, if you were being consistent here as libertarians, we have to say, hey, less citizens, which is the stated concept, is probably a good thing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, I mean, let's think about what practically it actually means when someone is a citizen. It's a whole lot of things together. It's they are allowed to stay there is, I think, the primary one. They're allowed to be there. And that they're allowed to be there, I think, then gives them a bunch of the avenues to get, like, welfare, to get a bunch of these other things. But it's not implied in being a citizen, right? All that's implied in being a citizen is that you're allowed to be there. Because, like, you know, if you're really wealthy and not eligible for welfare, you're not suddenly not a citizen anymore. So I think that's non-essential to what it means to be a citizen. I think being a citizen of a country literally just means that you're allowed to stay there. And I think everybody is allowed to stay wherever they want, so long as, you know, every single time I got to add on this asterisk, so long as they're not violating property rights. Duh, because all these fucking retards won't understand that that's implied. But yeah, no, I don't think any nation has a right to say who's allowed to be anywhere. So by default, everybody's allowed to be in any nation. I think everybody should be a citizen of every country.
Yeah, so that is a good way of looking at it. I suppose I'm kind of going through US citizenship. So if you're a citizen, then that grants you the obviously we're using the status terminology here, so I suppose bear with me, but the freedom to reside and work in the United States, the freedom to enter and leave the United States, voting, standing for public office, and applying for federal employment. So given that non-citizenship would imply that you are not free to reside and work in the United States however you see fit. Obviously, it implies you're not free to leave and enter the United States as you see fit. I think that's a fair enough point to say, well, you know, we want people to be citizens because we want them to be able to freely move around and we want them to be able to take whatever job. We want them to be able to associate with people however they see fit, and therefore they should be able to have any job they want. So, yeah, I think that's a fair argument to say that it's overall ends up being a negative, that Trump is planning on telling these people, hey, you can't have whatever job you want. You can't leave and enter the United States whenever you want, by not granting them citizenship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so as I said, like a lot of this border stuff is all just going to be kind of covering the same territory. So it's kind of the mean. A lot of them is discussing the means by which they're going to achieve this mass deportation or this mass prevention. So we probably don't need to cover all that same territory. The one good one that crops up there, I don't know why it crops up under immigration and borders. They might have cocked up where they were supposed to put this in, but because it much more fits. I suppose they do reference migration patterns, I guess, but it much more fits under the climate or environment section, which we can get into next if you want.
Yeah.
But Trump is going to repeal a Biden order requiring planning for the effects of climate change on world migration patterns. So I suppose that's the point in his favor as far as immigration goes. He doesn't want to centrally plan the economy around the potential effects of climate change going forward, I suppose.
Yeah, because that's just going to mean, the science, it tells us that we've got to have communism now. And then
Yeah.
that's what all these climate change plans are.
Yeah. Yeah. If the the climate can warm by a degree, but if it warms by a degree and a half, that's communism. We need communism to stop that. We need communism to prevent a 0.3 degrees Celsius increase in the temperature of the climate. If we don't get that, then terrible things will happen.
Yeah, because then like some glacier is gonna melt somewhere, and it's gonna release I don't know, water all over Moldova, and or the Maldives rather, and therefore destroy capitalism. Because obviously the colonies are really good at managing natural resources. As we've seen with the Aral Sea, they soaked all that water dry, so they do great with the oceans if sea levels are rising.
Yeah, I know. It's yeah. The central planning really, really went well in the USSR. They did a really good job of protecting their environment over there. Anyway, let's get stuck into this climate, energy, and the environment stuff. So this is where Trump's going to gain back a few points, I suppose, because he's a principal libertarian. He just doesn't like environmentalists, which is fine. I don't either. So I suppose that's a point in his favour. But so the first and foremost, he's going to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement, which committed nations to pursuing policies to limit carbon emissions that cause climate change. The order blocks the transfer of US funds previously obligated to the International Climate Finance Plan. So, in a word, based. That's among the best policies that we've discussed so far. Not only is he withdrawing from some arbitrary climate agreement, it's also reducing the amount of wealth that's being expropriated to people to be sent to some international climate finance plan. So Trump gets a resounding thumbs up on that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, unfortunately, he takes a step back almost immediately with the next one, sadly, which is him declaring a national energy emergency. So apparently this is a symbolic measure reflecting Trump's promise of energy expansion, which is not necessarily a bad thing if it's done the right way. Obviously, if we allow private companies to start producing more energy, then I don't have a problem with that. But in terms of specific policies, he also is urging the use of eminent domain and the Defence Production Act to allow the government to commandeer private land and resources to produce goods deemed to be a national necessity. So,
massively cringe.
Trump's fucked up here. Yeah.
Yeah, like
he was doing so well on this climate thing, and then he's turned around and gone bang with the central planning.
Yeah, like if it was just okay, we're going to allow any sort of fracking you want to do. We're going to allow you to like drill into the side of some sacred ancient Indian burial ground to drill oil out of it, and we're going to allow fucking you to make like tiny little nuclear reactors that you stick into your back garden or whatever. Yeah, that would all be great, and they would massively increase energy output if they did that. Using eminent domain to do all this. Seizing private property, that's destroying the root of what's required to have production. It's destroying production to get more production. It's just a straight up contradiction in terms. It's insane. Yeah, very cringe, very bad. I don't like it.
No, absolutely not. It's yeah, really, really bad policy. And it was funny just reading through it. I was like, geez, this is just gut punch after gut punch in terms of the terms that he's using, like eminent domain and commandeering private land and national necessity. It's just like, oh,
Yeah.
awful.
It's very Atlas Shrugged. It's like,
And then
sorry, Mr. Reardon. There's a
yeah.
national need for your metal at the moment.
Yeah, it was brutal. And then he follows it up with compelling the Army Corps of Engineers to use to the fullest extent possible its emergency permitting provisions to speed energy projects and urge all agencies to use similar emergency procedures that expedite or bypass permitting processes under the Endangered Species Act or other federal laws that protect wildlife. So I'm not exactly sure what to make of that.
So this is potentially,
from what I can tell, this is go.
It's potentially a good thing based on what I've heard Elon talking about, and obviously Elon's buddy with Trump at the moment. Where Elon keeps getting pissed off that he has like delayed rocket launches or delayed building projects and stuff because there's like some fucking endangered bug in the area that he can't disturb, and he's got to like make sure that his rocket sonic booms won't disrupt the hearing of whales. So he's got to conduct a study on whether it'll disrupt the hearing of whales. And he's like, fuck off, you know?
Yeah.
So if it's that, then it's very good. But I think it's also like, it's very clearly shows how the government sees emergency powers. Because he's saying, hey, use whatever emergency powers you want right now. Like, what is the emergency here? What is the emergency? Who knows?
Yeah.
Are there rolling blackouts in the US? I don't know. If anybody's in the US right now, tell me if they've been missing power for a few weeks and there's some sort of an emergency going on. But I certainly don't think there's any emergency. And he's just saying, no, use your emergency powers to get this done. Because he has a political goal he wants to accomplish here. Please say, use the emergency powers. Which is, of course, what every emergency power granted to any government ever has been. So you should always say, no, don't give a shit if it's an emergency. Fuck off and suck my cock.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, he gets back on track here with a couple of good policies. So he said he's going to eliminate prior administration's policies, which are intended to encourage electric vehicle development and consumption. So I'm assuming that's subsidies. Like taxes on maybe not taxes on petrol cars, but certainly subsidies for electric vehicles, both for their production and consumption. So yeah, I think that's another point in his favor. Less subsidies, the better, I suppose.
Yeah.
So another again, he goes 2 for 2 here with requiring all agencies within 30 days to submit to the White House Office of Management and Budget their plans to eliminate regulations and rules deemed burdensome to domestic energy production and consumption, with particular attention to oil, natural gas, coal, hydropower, biofuels, critical mineral, and nuclear energy. So we're repealing regulations and rules here to let people produce stuff. Trump's back on track here, I suppose.
Yeah, it is a very... I mean, this was the litmus test which Reform passed for me, which made me vote for them instead of spoiling my vote. Was that the inclusion of things like coal and natural gas, and obviously nuclear is very good, but everybody understands nuclear is good. Saying, yeah, no, stop getting in the way of coal. Like, that's a really... it's it's easy for us to forget. But imagine just going to a normie and saying, yeah, I'm for more coal power. And they think you're a fucking lunatic. So that's a pretty that's pretty good litmus test pass there that he is against these sorts of environmentalist shit. So that's definitely a very good policy there. Is just get out of the fucking way, Mr. Government.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it's I mean, he just keeps the next few things are the ones where I was, we got in a bit of a roll here, and we get some good stuff coming out. So, he's going to repeal multiple Biden orders and memoranda regarding climate change, including guidelines for implementing climate-related provisions that came in the Inflation Reduction Act, which was so ironic, and which was so the two policies were an effort to assess financial risks of allegedly not combating climate change and the establishment of a president's council of advisors on science and technology. So obviously the ironic part being there, obviously the Inflation Reduction Act causing more inflation by increasing government spending on these various initiatives. But yeah, so another point to Trump, he's repealing various government programs that are assessing the risk of something that we don't care about the risk of, I suppose.
Yeah, if literally all, I'd be the best fucking president ever. I'd literally just go in there. I'd work like 6 hours a day, signing things which says, hear ye, nobody has to obey this law anymore. I don't care if it's enforceable or not. I'm just going to start signing this shit out there and let the fucking Supreme Court deal with it. I don't care. I'm just going to start signing these all the fucking time. Maybe they're enforceable, maybe they're not. But now now the fucking courts have to deal with this shit. And it's like, I mean, maybe that's enforceable, who knows? And then the police are going to be completely confused about what they can enforce or not. Because I'm going to keep, every day I'll send out another one to the police saying, hear ye, police. Now you have to do a handstand if you want to arrest someone. And hear you, just do a bunch of fucking bullshit and just get in their fucking way. And, it'd be the greatest resurgence of capitalism ever seen.
Yeah, it is actually pretty cool that they just have this, like, most parliamentary systems don't have this just veto power where the prime minister or the president can just say, no, I'm just going to do this. And then if you can open cease about it until it goes to the Supreme Court, pretty much.
Yeah.
So
let's see it in the Supreme Court in fucking 4 years' time. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. In the meantime, yeah, exactly. Obviously, it's cringe and bad when someone like FDR gets in and starts using it to wield all this executive power to start burning crops and shit. But if the right person gets in, it can actually be used for some good, I suppose. So, but yeah, so again, he goes again with streamlining other fossil fuel extraction in Alaska with a command to rescind, revoke, revise, amend, defer, or grant exemptions from any and all regulatory actions relevant in the state. And specifically, Trump is restoring any suspended fossil fuel leases within the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So he doesn't give a fuck about the endangered polar bears or whatever that populate Alaska. He wants to get more oil. So he wants private companies to go out there and start drilling for more oil. So good for him.
Yeah, because fundamentally, I care a lot more about humans being able to drive their cars than I care about every single polar bear on Earth. Not particularly concerned about them, unless they're like in a zoo or something, because then it's fun to look at them. But I'm not looking at them if they're in the fucking Arctic or whatever. I don't care about them.
I don't even know if there's polar bears in Alaska, so
I think there are because it's
the point stands whether it's
because the polar bears. I remember they intermingle with grizzly bears in North America sometimes. That's how you get growler bears, I believe they're called. So it's got to be It's got to be the northern hem, because if it was Antarctica, then nobody would ever hear about polar bears.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll kill off all the beavers. Anyway, we'll stop them producing their own natural dams.
Unless
dams for them.
Yeah, unless they get to like good work, send like a small beaver army to dam up a lake to kill off some endangered beetle or something. That would be kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, that'd be cool. But yeah, and then so he goes on to deny a pending U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to request to create an indigenous sacred site within the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So there we go. We're not letting the natives have their burial sites. We're drilling for oil there.
Mhm.
So there's another one. So this one's interesting. So he says, restore the first Trump administration rules, and I didn't look into the rules, so I'm uneducated on this one, on hunting and trapping in national preserves in Alaska, ordering the Interior Department to align federal rules on hunting and fishing in Alaska with rules for state government lands. So, I mean, if the rules were that you could hunt and trap as much as you want in national preserves when Trump was in office last time, then I guess that's good. I'm assuming it's more likely to be that than that he gives a fuck about the random wildlife that lives there. But
Yeah, it'd be very
I could be
strange
wrong
if you
about that.
could.
I'd have to actually look up.
It'd be very strange if you could kill like a deer with an oil drill, but not with a gun. That would be a strange position to take, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And then so he's going to roll back other Biden era limits on regulations or regulations on fossil fuel extraction on federal lands. So yeah, so we're privatizing the commons. We're letting people go in and you know, drill for oil or find coal seam gas or whatever it is, even if the land is allegedly controlled by the US government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good because I mean, if you look at a map of federal land in the U.S., the Western United States is basically all just federal land. They need to get rid of that whole thing right now and let the market take over.
Yeah, 100%. It is a funny topic that people bring up. You know, when they're you know, the naive criticism of libertarianism is like, oh, what if one person starts controlling all this land and starts, you know, stopping people from using it? It's like, well, may I introduce you to the United States government?
Yeah, I got bad news
That's
for
exactly
you
what they do.
if you've ever been to Nevada, because it's basically all state land.
Yeah, exactly. Try going to Area 51 and see how far you get. You're not allowed to go there, unfortunately, and it's not because of some private company.
It's like the classic fucking
yeah,
thing
so,
of a minarchist. If you let them just talk for a little bit, they'll start describing the all these horror scenarios about like one company somehow being able to take over, and they establish some sort of a horrible, no good monopoly on the use of force, and it's like, oh jeez, that would be awful. So of course, what we need is a monopoly on the use of force to prevent one company from taking over. Again,
exactly.
The worst case scenario for the system we advocate is the system they advocate. So just go with our system.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty obvious to me. I don't know why these people are so stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. So an interesting one is he's making the outer continental shelf ineligible for wind energy leases. So he's limiting non-fossil fuel development. And I think at the end of the day, like, I think wind energy is kind of cringe. Like, I don't see it replacing fossil fuels anytime soon. Like, what happens if the wind's not blowing, dickhead? But look, at the end of the day, people should be allowed to produce wind farms if that's what they want to do. So I suppose that's a point against Trump. But yeah.
Yeah, depending on what is meant by a lease, does that mean like the government's loaning them money?
That was what I was going to say as well. Does this mean that like a company has to just pay for the ongoing use of federal land, or land that the government claims? Because in which case, I mean, that's one tough to weigh out. Would you rather just no one's using it? I don't know.
I mean,
you'd rather privatize it, obviously. But.
Yeah, because I'm not sure in the context of a government what is meant by a lease to use wind energy. So it would depend entirely on what that means. If that's some sort of a subsidy, then yes, based, get rid of it. If it's like if it's like a license, more like, you know, there shouldn't be any licenses in the first place. So everybody should be licensed to do everything. I should be licensed to be a neurosurgeon right this second. Yeah. So it would depend. It's very dependent on what the lease actually entails, which is going to be like probably 5,000 pages of dense legalese explaining exactly what that means. And I'm not going to read that. Nobody has ever read that.
Yeah. Yeah. So just contextually, I'm guessing that it's going to be like the lease would be like the company comes along and says, "Hey, if I pay you X number of dollars each year, will you let me build a wind farm on this land?" And the government says yes if they're granting the lease.
Mm.
So I guess in that sense, it's probably a negative. That's my interpretation of it. Is I think
Mm.
the lease is the government granting people the ability to use that land to build wind farms or do whatever else. So I guess in that sense, it's not ideal that we're just halting those leases entirely and just letting the land sit unproductively, I suppose.
Yeah.
So the last one under this section is slightly difficult to pass, I suppose, but he wants to re-engage a legal and regulatory battle with the Californian state government over water routes from Sacramento to the San Joaquin Delta. Trump wants to override fish and wildlife protection efforts to route more of the water to the Central Valley and Southern California. Trying to kind of pass that one out. I mean, if the California government's engaging in some kind of regulation, then it's most likely bad. I mean, all regulations are bad, but particularly California, because California is just a commie shithole. I mean, I can't talk. I live in a commie shithole, but at the same time, what Trump wants. It says Trump wants to do this water rerouting, and in a sense, I think that's just, unless it's some private company that wants to do this, and the California government's stepping in their way, and then Trump's trying to stop them from doing that. It seems like it's more like Trump just wants to centrally plan where water goes in the United States. So I think it's just, to borrow that like meme, it's just kind of two retards fighting here, like just bad policy met by bad policy.
So, like, based on the exact wording, it sounds like central planning versus central planning. But based on the fact that I know California is really heavy on their regulations about how you're allowed to use water, it's entirely possible that this isn't central planning, that he just wants to get rid of what California already has on their law books and allow people to redirect the water. That's entirely possible. So if it is that, then it's a good thing.
Yeah. So yeah. If that is the case, if it's just him saying no, stop enforcing this regulation, then obviously we're for it. But that's another one that's a bit up in the air for me. Okay, so that's it for climate and energy. We can get on to this diversity stuff, like civil rights law, all that kind of stuff, because there's some more good stuff in here for us to celebrate and pat Trump on the back for. But to get us started, he's given executive branch departments and agencies 60 days to eliminate diversity, equity, inclusion programs, including all chief diversity officer jobs, equity action plans, and environmental justice positions.
Based?
And he's requiring them to give an accounting of, based. And he's requiring these agencies to give an accounting of previous DEI efforts, including names of relevant DEI contractors and DEI grant recipients. And he's terminating a 60-year-old executive order setting anti-discrimination requirements for government agencies and contractors. Based, we're getting back to repealing all this bullshit, government bloat and bureaucracy, giving people, free taxpayer money to do bullshit jobs.
And hopefully this is a sign of things to come, and he's able to completely eliminate the entire civil rights regime. Because, I mean, imagine if he does that, then he's definitely the best president in centuries. This is civil rights infects fucking everything. In fact, a lot of Austrians like to talk about how fiat money infects everything and whatnot. And that's all true. But so does civil rights. Like, civil rights, it really causes so many problems across the entire board. And it's basically state-enforced leftism, or rather, I should say, state-enforced culture warism, state-enforced Marxism. Right?
I can't wait for some bus company in the middle of buttfuck Alabama to enforce the anti-Rosa Parks law and say, they have to all go back to the back of the bus. Fucking hell, that'd be funny.
Because, like, this is... think about what civil rights does. It is every private company, every private club, everywhere, they are no longer allowed to freely associate. They are no longer allowed to hire the best candidate for the job. They have to, by state edict, they have to preach leftism. They have to support their own destruction. Like, it's a very nefarious type of thing going on here. It's really, really destructive and evil. So anything which moves towards getting rid of all this, I mean, the title I gave the section was diversity / call me BS. That's what I believe. It's communism. Mm-hmm. Any step towards getting these fucking pinkos out and on their arses, and they've got to compete in the fucking free market now, bucko. Anything which moves towards that is a very, very positive move.
Yeah, no, it's a good policy, or it's a good repealing of a policy, I guess I should say. And yeah, I mean, it's another area where Trump's doing quite well in. I suppose he's also got this separate Office of Management, OMB, Office of Management and Budget order. Which is effectively putting all federal DEI officers on immediate leave pending their elimination. So,
nice.
By elimination, I wonder if he means like summary execution, just eliminate them.
Well, I can't advocate for any such thing
because we don't support people for that. Yeah, no, we don't want that. We don't want that. But hopefully, he just means they don't have a job anymore.
Indeed.
That'd be good. Yeah, so next up he's going to repeal several Biden-era directives on racial and ethnic equality and LGBTQ rights. They include orders intended to ensure equitable distribution of federal money based on the 2020 census, preventing government discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation, and specifically encouraging inclusion in school settings. White House educational initiatives for Native Americans, Hispanics, and Black Americans, and an order expressly allowing transgender persons to serve in the military. So this one, there's nothing explicit in here about the actual reduction in government spending. It's more just reducing the extent to which equitable distribution of it is required. So I don't really think we can say that this is an objectively good thing from a libertarian perspective, because whether the money's getting sent to a black guy or a white guy, like, it's still bad at the end of the day. So,
well, let's just take the last part of that policy. Imagine if the policy says, and the U.S. military will no longer allow any white person to serve. Well, that would overnight reduce the size of the U.S. military by 90%. And that would obviously be a very good thing. So I think it's a good thing whenever the US military says a certain group of people isn't allowed to serve anymore. Because I think it's bad. Preventing transgenders from serving in the military, just even that part of the policy is good. And it would depend on what exactly it means by the rest of the policy. Because, I mean, these sound like just extra things on top of whatever the already existing regulations were, where it's like, and now we got to care about the gays, and now we got to care about the blacks. And, it sounds like he's repealing a lot of things where it's, and now we got to care about this. If it is that, good. If it is literally just saying, no, you're no longer giving it to gays, you're giving it to straights, you're no longer giving it to blacks, you're giving it to whites, then it's like, okay, what? That's just artificially. I mean, so I mean, if it is, it might be like there's some privileged group, like I don't know, poor people, right? Let's take poor people as an example. Maybe if you say no, we're going to shift the dial away from poor people towards rich people, that could either mean you're benefiting the rich at the expense of the poor, or you're just benefiting the poor less at the expense of the rich, right? Because in either case, you're moving it towards the rich. So it would depend on how exactly that comes about.
Yeah, it's a bit of a toss up, I suppose, whether it happens to somehow reduce the amount of total taxation that's being taken away from people because some people are getting money redistributed back to them that they were taxed from, I guess, maybe. But yeah, it's a tough one to kind of pass out prior to the fact. So what do you think about this one? So requiring that the US government recognize only two genders. So they only want to recognize male and female on all their various like government documents, like passports, visas, and pretty much all other documents, and in programs and communications. I just think that that's kind of like from a libertarian perspective, like who really cares? Like, let's like, sure, there's only two genders, but like,
so
I don't really care whether the government thinks so or not, I suppose.
So the way I read it, I don't know if this is the correct wording of how he actually said it, but when I was looking at this, it was saying that they recognize two sexes, as in male and female, which like, and in my opinion definitely was. Who cares how many fucking sexes the US government recognizes? Does this matter at all? And it's like, would we care in the slightest if the US government said, okay, gravity is a fact? Okay.
Yeah.
Go off, I guess.
Yeah, cool.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Because
2 + 2 = 4.
it is a fact that there are two sexes. Now, this is the little game that they've been playing for quite a while. Because it used to be the case that, the transgender people, they're like, oh no, there are, of course, two sexes. And even now, they used to say, like, oh no, of course, I'm biologically male, but I want to present as a female. It's like, okay, whatever. And then it becomes, oh, no, yeah, of course, there's two sexes, but I'm the other sex. But, like, how can you even have a concept of transgender or transsexual when sex is like, who knows what it is, right? And they'll point to intersex people as if that refutes the fact that there are two sexes. Because what the fuck does inter mean? It doesn't mean third, right? Intersex people aren't a third sex. They don't produce. There's not like, okay, women produce eggs, men produce sperm, and intersex people produce gloop. And another type of intersex produces fucking ectoplasm. There aren't extra fucking gametes to produce. Yeah. There's only a sperm and an egg. That's where the concept of sex comes from. It's from sexual reproduction, as against asexual reproduction. It's sperm and egg, two gametes. That's because, like, nature. Yeah. People don't understand this. Nature does not want to create any inefficiencies. If I want to personify nature a little bit, you're not going to have three sexes ever occurring in any species ever if two sexes can do the job, and two sexes can do the job, right? You just need to get beyond what asexual reproduction can do. You literally just need an exchange of genetic material. You don't need a three-way exchange of genetic material. You don't need a four-way exchange of genetic material. This is all very redundant, right? If you want to have faster mutations, then you just have more of those two-way exchanges, right? Rather than having to get fucking three individuals together at every fucking instance, the smallest number of individuals you can possibly get together to have sex, whilst still getting the benefits of sexual reproduction, is two. That's why there are two sexes in every sexual species, ever, and how there ever will be, unless somebody starts muddling around with like creating custom species, right? In terms of evolution, there will only ever be two sexes ever evolved. I will die on that hill.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to your original point, the term intersex literally is defining itself in reference to the two sexes, right? Like,
Yeah.
if we were trying to argue that it was a third sex, and you wouldn't call it intersex because, well, in that case, you're literally just defining it as in between the two sexes, in a sense. So if you wanted to, yeah, you have to call it. It would be male, female, and something else in whatever term you wanted to come up with, female or something to come up with a third sex. The fact that this just this individual's intersex, I mean, you're just kind of admitting there that they're just kind of in between the two sexes in a sense. So the next one is he's mandating that all federal civil rights law and labor law be interpreted and enforced with the understanding that sex is not a synonym for and does not include the concept of gender identity. So, I'm not sure how to feel about that one. I think that's just another kind of who cares type.
Actually, I think this one's a very good one.
He's not actually repealing this. Yeah, go.
So, based on your wording there, let's take what it means when people say gender identity. What they mean is that I can just arbitrarily say whatever I want. I can say I'm a woman, now I'm a man, now I'm a woman, now I'm a man, so on and so forth, and then it becomes the case that that is true. So, if you have civil rights regulation where it has to take that into account, then anybody can just arbitrarily identify as whatever they want. This is a government policy which rejects the law of identity. Very horrible thing. So, what the actual practical implication of this is, the philosophical standpoint is, they are embracing the law of identity as it pertains to this area of legislation, which is good. And it implies that I can no longer just say, I can no longer just get fired from a job because I was incompetent, and then just say, well, I'm a transgender now, and you were discriminating against me. They will no longer, based on your wording, they will no longer hear that as valid, which is very good. That's just another retraction of civil rights regulation.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. Trump's doing well here on these policies, again, not because of some principled stance, just because, he happens to align with the position for other reasons, but good nonetheless. And then, so the last couple, so he's dissolving a White House Gender Policy Council and repealing the Department of Education guidelines on Title IX concerning transgender rights and various documents advising schools on how to support and protect LGBTQ persons. And then lastly, forbidding federal money, including grants, from being used to promote gender ideology and directing the Attorney General and Homeland Security Secretary to ensure that males are not detained in women's prisons or housed in women's detention centres. So I think he's gone 2 for 2 on those last couple as well, overall.
Yeah, getting rid of all the federal money. Get rid of federal money on X. Replace X with whatever. Good.
Yeah, exactly. And then so the last, second to last topic, maybe. So we've got federal workers and government structure. So this is where Doge comes in. So he's establishing the Department of Government Efficiency under the Executive Office of the President until July 2026. This is going to be the entity led by Elon Musk, the world's richest man, and is charged with recommending cuts in federal programs and spending. So obviously that's phenomenal, and to whatever extent it actually does stuff, which, I mean, who knows? A lot of federal spending is mandatory, and they kind of get close to touching it, and the president kind of get close to touching it under executive order. So, but to whatever extent it does anything, it's obviously going to be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like I do disagree that there's
each agency.
Like I do disagree that there's such a thing as an efficient government, but It sounds like I think Elon mostly picked that acronym because it's the fucking dog meme.
To get Doge in there.
Yeah, so I don't think we should take that too seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, still, I mean, being Milton Friedman about, being status sufficiency experts, I guess, is better than not caring about efficiency whatsoever. But I do agree, obviously, in principle, that it's not a proper concept, an efficient government. But be that as it may, they're also requiring each agency to establish their own Doge team of at least 4 people to work with Musk's operation. So, look, that's interesting because now that I read it out, I'm like, well, that's almost a contradiction because they're like being like, well, we're going to have this Department of Government Efficiency and we're going to make sure that every department has 4 people that are working on this Department of Government Efficiency because we know for sure that that's the most efficient way of doing it. And it's like, well, maybe we could just let Elon do it all by himself and then only hire 1 person to do the job rather than having 4 people in each department trying to be governmentally efficient.
It does depend on what specifically these people are going to do. Because maybe their role can be set up such that, just like the bureaucrat's job is just to make up more fucking bullshit rules to fuck you over, maybe somehow you could set up their role where it's a counterplay to this, where their job is to try and remove as many, and not just based on the letter of how you write their job, I mean literally like, you set up the incentive such that they're incentivized to remove as many regulations off the book as possible. If you could do something like that, then great. You want those in each agency. Because that's going to balance out the bureaucrats a little bit. Hopefully, it'll balance them so much they'll get tipped into water and drowned in Minecraft.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, we'll all bring them into a Minecraft server and throw them into throw their Minecraft characters into the lake and drown them. All right, next up, freeze federal hiring with exceptions, notably immigration and border enforcement posts in the U.S. military. So he's not freezing hiring on immigration and border enforcement posts, obviously, given his stance on borders. But in general, outside of those departments, he is freezing federal hiring. And there's also a generic exception to the action also bars contracting with outside labor to circumvent the hiring freeze. So there you go. So look, obviously he's not cutting as many federal jobs as he could be because he's granting exceptions for certain arbitrary sections of the US government. But federal hiring freeze, better than nothing, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a block on new federal laws and regulations in all agencies where Trump's appointed agency chief is not yet on the job to approve new edicts, except for an emergency situation. So I guess good because, look, no new regulations for a little while is good. Obviously, I'm sure most of those will just come into effect as soon as Trump's appointed agency chief comes in and approves them. But nonetheless, I guess a good interim policy. The next one, interesting. So he's requiring all federal workers to return full-time to in-person work, so they can't work from home. Not sure about this one.
That's making it more inconvenient to be a federal worker. So I'm for it. If you also required them to wear a funny little hat with a propeller on it, and they got to hop into work, I'd also be for that.
Yeah, that's fair. Actually, now that I think it's disincentivizing you from being, if you care about, it's making the marginal cost of being a federal worker higher for people because a lot of people like working from home. So, I see your point. I love it. Direct reviews across the executive branch of career senior executive officials, and effectively making it easy to fire, demote, or reassign those federal employees. So, again, we're making it easier to fire people demote them so we get to pay them less for doing the same job, hopefully, or doing less work. I guess would it be even better because they're influencing people less. So, yeah, more good stuff, I suppose. I suppose I'm kind of just like probably going into too much detail with each of these. In general, what he's doing is making it more difficult to hire people, making it more costly to be a federal employee, and giving you less job certainty if you decide to be a government parasite, I suppose.
Absolutely, which is all very good things.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, how many more topics do we have? So we've still got healthcare, nationalism, and the Capitol riot. So on the Capitol riot, obviously he granted those full pardons to the individuals convicted or still being prosecuted for January 6th, the quote unquote attack on the US Capitol. So as someone who doesn't believe in public property being controlled by the state, I fully support these pardons. However, I'm sure the libertarians that all think that the state should impose some arbitrary restrictions on government property, they really don't like this. They really hate how these people cross the border into the capital.
Yeah, they must be,
I'm sure.
because I mean they're consistent people. These guys, don't accuse them of anything,
Yeah.
But before you continue with anything else, I'm just gonna nip to the toilet real quick.
Yeah. No dramas.
Hello.
Hello there. I couldn't mute myself, so I just had to stop myself from like talking. But anyway, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Why my Discord's not letting me just mute my own microphone? But anyway, yeah. So on this Capitol riot stuff, yeah, I think it's quite funny how when some person from Mexico crosses the government's border into the United States, into some like vacant land in New Mexico or something, that is like the worst thing ever. And they need to be, you know, the military needs to step in and use tanks to prevent them from crossing the border. But, it's obviously all good. This stuff is all good for no like obvious reason why this would be any better than that.
Well, see, what you don't get here is that Dave Smith is actually omniscient, and so Dave Smith, he happens to know that if the White House was private, the way they would use the White House is by marching people in animal costumes through it. And that's how they would want to use the White House if it was private. But if you know, if some business was private and was trying to hire Mexicans, they would never do that. So the Mexicans are out.
Yeah, no, that would
'Cause
never happen.
No
in a free
private
market.
business in the history of the U.S. has ever tried to hire Mexicans. But if
No,
the
it's
White
never
House was
happened.
private, then they'd allow processions of people through there because you just got to run it like it was a market. It's very easy.
Yeah, exactly. It's very simple. You got to imitate the market because we all know that that's completely possible,
Mhm.
and there's no like long-standing problem. Like maybe about economic calculation, maybe that
Mhm.
someone came up with back in like nearly 100 years ago. I don't know if any did. That definitely never happened. No one would
Yeah,
have come up with
like
something like that. It's all
if
possible.
somebody did try to come up with that, I think they'd be misses. You know, they'd be missing that thing. Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
also definitely not the case that any private company would ever try to enforce a mask, that you got to wear a mask or you got to have a vax to deal with them. And if they did, then they just clearly don't know how to run their own private property as if it was private property. So the government's got to come in and tell them how to run their private property like it was private property. And the government's got to say that they're not allowed to enforce mask regulations because, my memory stretches far back enough to when the neoprags were on that fucking game.
Yeah. No, I do recall that the argument was, well, we don't want government regulations, but it's better that the government regulate that you can't force people to have masks than that you can force people to have masks. So,
Yeah, and what we want
um,
is we want a secessionist region, perhaps within a state, maybe southern, maybe fairly tropical, a lot of swampy areas. We want some sort of big business, big American institutional business, to be able to run, I don't know, maybe its own like local government where it's got a nuclear reactor and stuff, maybe like a theme park. And we would definitely, if such a thing were to happen, the real anarcho-capitalist solution is to have Ron DeSantis come in and quash this rebellion if it ever tries to disobey him.
I remember that. I do remember that. Yeah, I remember you doing a video on that ages ago. How long ago was that?
Oof. It was right when it was happening,
Feels
I
like it
think.
was like
2 years, maybe.
how long you been? It was one of your earlier videos. But yeah, no, that was a funny one when the Republicans will do whatever they can to twist themselves into knots to defend random statism by the GOP. It's not great.
Yeah. 2 years ago, by the way.
Anyway, back to these. Yeah, back to these policies. So they cover. I'm kind of got. I kind of don't want to go through everyone individually now because I feel like there's a lot of stuff where it's like it's kind of be redundant. Like they're covering multiple. They're the same topic, just different executive orders doing specific
Mm-hmm.
things within that topic. But on the death penalty, so he's directing the Attorney General to explore whether 37 federal prisoners who had death sentences commuted to life imprisonment can be charged and tried with capital crimes in state courts. Death penalty. I understand like kind of the libertarian stance from like an estoppel standpoint is like, well, if you killed someone, you can be killed as punishment for that. But I don't know if all these people are actually guilty of killing people, but I don't know.
It depends. I mean, it depends exactly on what you said. It depends on if they're murderers. Yeah, fucking get rid of them. Don't need them anymore. If any of them aren't murderers, though, then it's murder to kill them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which I feel like there's a decent chance. I mean, the thing is though, like some of these drug cartel guys are probably still guilty of killing people. So,
Oh yeah.
because there was like what was that Mexican guy, El Chapo,
Mm.
who is he still in federal prison in the United States? I think. I don't
Didn't he
know,
get
but
out?
he's obviously been done for drugs. But he got out and then he got convicted. He got found again, I think.
What an idiot.
Yeah, he managed to escape a couple times, I think, but I think he's back in now. Yeah, so he's reported to be responsible for the deaths of over 34,000 people. Okay, so he doesn't classify as one of those innocent drug dealers.
Yeah, like the thing is with most ever since the war on drugs, like what people have to understand here is when you get the war on drugs, at the beginning it was mostly, at least relatively, good guys, right? They probably weren't like your most upstanding businessman ever, but they weren't going to like murder a bunch of people or anything like that. This is a point actually Adrian Shepard makes, where they were mostly the good guys at the start, and then the US government came in and killed off all those good guys. And what do you get when you bring all this violence to this industry? Of course, only the most violent are able to survive, and that's why the Mexican cartels are like uniquely like barbaric in terms
Brutal.
of crime syndicates. And that's why fucking Ross Ulbricht, he was so fucking peaceful, because he wasn't being he didn't survive like a sieve through all these layers of we're going to kill off all the good guys. He was just an entrepreneur who came in. It's like, hey, I can make this whole drug trade thing a whole lot more efficient. I'm gonna, what are these people doing? Like cutting heads off and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what are they doing? That's so expensive. I'm gonna come in here.
And,
really, he's like a quant. He comes in and he fucking rams the margins on this. So like, that's why you get so much violence here. So you can bet that if you've got some like big like MS-13 guy or whatever, dude's probably a murderer, right? You can basically guarantee it. So I'm not particularly sympathetic to these sorts. That isn't to say that I think it's good to engage in war with them, because these types only arise when you have the government coming in. So Input just asked something real quick before I finish off on this. Who are the good guys Zulu's talking about? So like in the early days before the drug war, there were like, you still got a lot of drugs up from Mexico, but the people who were importing the drugs and who were making the drugs and whatnot, they weren't like these super violent, like, we'll chop off a bunch of fucking heads and put it onto a car window and just do a bunch of really barbaric shit. Like, they weren't the barbarians we have now. Like, they were relatively good. Like, I still think, not to say that they were good people. I think a lot of them were probably fairly untoward. I wouldn't trust them the most out of anybody, but they wouldn't, if you like crossed them, just shoot you in the fucking head or cut your fucking limbs off and leave you to bleed out. Like the drug dealers we have now in these Mexican cartels are really of a different sort. They're not just sort of shady types of like, do I really trust this guy? They're more like, hey, if I look at this guy wrong, he's going to skin me alive. Like, the way you get from here to there, just to make sure I get it on camera, is that you have the US kills off all of the good guys or puts them in jail or whatever.
Yeah. You're creating competition in who can be the most violent, rather than just who can be the most effective or the most efficient and cheapest and best quality. You're just you're creating you're inventing this new market in just being as violent as humanly possible in order to scare off your competition, essentially. So an interesting one here. So Trump is revoking the security clearances of 50 people accused of aiding Biden's 2020 campaign via their collective statement about the Hunter Biden laptop thing. So, I mean, my position on security clearance is that everyone should have maximum security clearance in the United States government. We should all be able to see every single piece of information that the US government currently holds as under some kind of classified status. And I mean, on top of this, I mean, the whole Hunter Biden thing. I don't know. I mean, if he was just smoking crack, then good on him, I suppose. I think he did some other more questionable stuff, but I don't know.
Didn't he like fuck his niece or something? I think he's a bit of a wrongin', or as the kids like to say, did he blood? So let's think about security clearance. So yes, every single person should be allowed to know everything about the US government, but I think security clearance entails a little bit more more than that. It would be like if Adolf Hitler said, Goering is no longer allowed in any military meetings. He's not allowed to do anything. That would be a good thing, right? It's like sort of a soft firing, in my view. So we could really go it this way. All of these people with security clearance in like the CIA and FBI and whatnot, they have all tried to prevent other people from getting access to that information by their job description. So Estoppel has it that the same should be done to them. Right? Eye for an eye. So I think it's actually good to revoke it from these people. And you should revoke it from every one of them. And have just one person with security clearance, and it's me.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Yeah. No, I have no issue with that. I'm trying to see what else. I'm kind of just picking and choosing which ones I think are interesting and might have some good conversation topics on them. Direct the Attorney General to take all necessary and lawful action to supply states with adequate drugs to carry out lethal injection. Yeah, not. Okay, a bad one, I suppose, probably, is in a symbolic gesture is directing the Attorney General to encourage state attorneys and district attorneys to pursue the death penalty in all possible cases. So obviously the thing is with the US, capital punishment can be enforced for non-murder. You can be capitally punished for quote unquote treason, and other stuff like even like mass just drug trafficking is sufficient to get you put on death row. But yeah, treason, espionage, drug trafficking, all those are considered quote unquote crimes against the state, and therefore they can be prosecuted as capital crimes. So to the extent that he's doing that, it's obviously a really bad thing. We don't want people being killed just for dealing a little bit of weed or anything like that, or even a lot of weed.
Yeah. So, given that the policy is essentially we're going to kill murderers and we're going to murder a bunch of people, I think you've got to just reject it on its face. Like, nope, no, no. Because, first of all, it's a package deal. And also it's saying, we're going to kill a bunch of people. We're going to murder a bunch of people. Just no, 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 no.
Yeah, exactly. So, interesting one here. I've got a unique take on this one, perhaps. So, Trump this is on the topic of nationalism. So, Trump's requiring his own personal approval of new architectural and design standards for federal buildings, so the president can ensure federal structures respect regional, traditional, and classical architectural heritage in order to uplift and beautify public spaces and ennoble the United States. And I suppose my hope is that they're focused so much on ensuring that that these federal structures respect architectural heritage, and they're less focused on the actual building standards. So hopefully that these really classically built structures all fall apart and break. That's all we can really hope for with that one, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I mean, so this is just I think another money hole that he's dug here for us. Because now every building project has to have like a council of Keatings on hand to say like, oh, you need more Parthenons on there. You need more. You need more fucking gargoyles on the roof. It's like, I mean, okay, it's not the end of the world. But I mean, I don't think the government should be doing anything. But this is like, fucking. Let's get into more aesthetics with the government. It's like, nah, just leave it alone. I don't want a government committee on which paintings should be involved in government buildings. I don't want a government committee on what wattage of light bulb to use in government buildings. I don't want government committees on any of these fucking things. This just sounds like another fucking government committee.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, and it'll end up inevitably producing a horrific result because they all have terrible philosophies as far as that's concerned, and we'll get heaps of bananas sticky taped to fucking walls, and that'll be considered aesthetic.
Yeah.
Trump won't approve a new building without a golden toilet. Oh, I've changed my mind now. Golden toilets for everyone. Yeah. Oh, here's an interesting one. Trump is making it legal to sexually assault people if you're in a life and death scenario.
What?
Believe it or not, he's following the objectivist criticism of the NAP. I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say the Dave Smith 12 shot scenario.
Oh yes. Yeah, he's making it no longer illegal to do that if the person has had 12 or more shots of vodka.
Yes, indeed.
That's the new law. So 11 shots, you can't do it. If you get her to have that 12th or 13th, then it's fair game, I suppose.
They'll have to come in there with rules and measure like, this shot's still got a millimeter left in it, so sorry, that's 11, bud. 11.9.
11 and 29 mils, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's probably just about, the withdrawal from the WHO is pretty cool. Getting out of the World Health Organization and stopping future transfers of money to that organization. I mean, the WHO was a really good racket for every other country in the world that was receiving money from the United States so that it could continue, but not so great for the US. So, I think it's great that they're withdrawing from it, and they're going to not stop paying for Nigerian healthcare or Azerbaijan insulin. I think that's a great thing.
And like, I've been seeing a bunch of fucking people getting pissy over this on Twitter. It's like, oh, but now a bunch of people in Africa are going to be getting AIDS. It's like, after a certain point, just stop fucking without a condom. It's really not difficult. Don't just fuck everything that moves. Don't just be a fucking brute. Because this ties into another video I'm going to be making at some point, where I think they're choosing to be poor. These people, 99.99% of homeless people, 99% of Africans, were in absolute poverty. Obviously, some of them are wealthy, but most of them, who are in absolute poverty, they're choosing to be poor. They made those choices, and I like to live and let live, as it were. We should grant their choice. Okay, you want to be poor? Be poor. Don't don't expect any help from me. If you want to go around fucking everything that moves, don't expect me to fucking pay for your AIDS medication. All right? How about just don't fuck everything that moves? I'm just sick and tired of all of these excuses from people. Or no, I just can't, nothing I can do. I can't help it. I just can't help it. I just gotta be poor. No. Fuck you. I do not buy any of these fucking bullshit excuses, because there are people already who have risen above that and shown that no, you can choose wealth. You can choose to be wealthy. And this gives a whole new framework to analyze these people. You can, or the chronically impoverished. I'm not saying people who are maybe on hard times, maybe they've been laid off or whatever, and they're trying to get a job or whatever. I'm not talking about those people. They're trying to do good. I respect that. I'm talking about the people who are just lazy fucking bums. You're now able, because they chose to be poor, to evaluate their poverty and say, they're evil, they're bad, they're no good. So don't fucking help them. Grant them their fucking choice. They want to be poor, let them be poor.
Yeah, 100%. And encouraging government spending doesn't alleviate poverty. Otherwise, we would have alleviated poverty 10 times over with the amount of money that's been spent per capita on all these impoverished people. It comes down to the will to actually change your behavior. As you said, these people want to be poor, and they'll be poor whether we subsidize their poverty or whether we don't. And of course, on top of that, you're creating more poverty by disincentivizing productivity and encouraging anti-productivity. So yeah, it's just a terrible, misguided, and fundamentally flawed philosophy that we can fix people just by giving them more money. We would have fixed it already. Realistically, I think that's my position on this topic, is that if welfare was the answer, that we would have fixed it by now.
Yeah.
There's just no reason why we wouldn't know the amount of money that's been spent on these people.
Yeah, because I think there's a massive amount. Africa is like just one big fucking money pit that everybody just keeps throwing their fucking money into. Like everybody, fucking libertarian organizations are throwing like millions of dollars, many millions of dollars a year into trying to educate the Africans into libertarianism. And I think that's a big old fucking waste of money. Spend that in the US, it'll be a lot more useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one that we didn't touch on that's actually a really, really good one, one of the best ones, in fact, is that he's repealing an executive order on artificial intelligence that aimed to set guardrails on the development of AI, to which we say, brilliant, get rid of the guardrails, let people create all the deep fakes and other AI slop that they want, and develop new models and new technology that further advances what AI is capable of.
Absolutely, yes. Because these AI safety people, it's mostly a load of nonsense. Okay, let's look at it this way. An artificial intelligence, the entire premise of their whole ideology is that at some point it will become like human intelligence, based on the current techniques. There's some new technique in the future. Based on the current techniques, I think there's a necessary plateau here. Now, it's not a plateau in terms of how well does it transform text. Sure, they could keep transforming text better and better and better and better and better. It's in terms of, can they form concepts? No. At no point along the line of, because it's just a big fucking set of linear equations. Fundamentally, that's what these neural networks are. Linear equations don't have any free will. They can't choose. So they can't form concepts. They are severely limited to whatever concepts humans come up with. And they can transform those concepts a whole bunch, for sure. AI is a great thing. I love AI. I've got a 3-odd-hour video saying how much I love AI. But a language model, all it's doing, we just need to get right down to basics, is you give it a string of text, and it predicts what the next part of text is going to be. That's not the same thing as general intelligence. It's like a really, really powerful parrot. And a really, really powerful parrot might be able to say some really interesting things, but it's not an existential threat. Sorry, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's just at the end of the day, I think Terminator broke people's brains. Like they have this. It's genuinely, you see people reference Terminator and Skynet as like what they think AI could be, and it's like, in what other scenario would you ever say it's a good idea to reference a science fiction movie, like an action movie that's designed to be, a fantasy at the end of the day, a sci-fi movie?
Yeah.
In what other scenario do people think, yes, that's the appropriate frame of reference for how things are actually going to turn out in reality, right? It's an absurd. It'd be like, taking, what happens in Star Wars as evidence that we shouldn't build spaceships. It's like, well, no, just because we build spaceships doesn't mean there's going to be like a huge galactic empire that's going to, destroy planets and shit. Like, we can still build spaceships because they're fucking cool and they'll do cool shit for us. That's not a good reason to stop SpaceX just because of Star Wars. So I don't see how Terminator's any argument against AI.
Yeah, and it's like I do understand the arguments. Like, I know where they're coming from, because I used to agree with these arguments, like the paperclip collector, or the paperclip maximizer, where I mixed up paperclip maximizer and stamp collector. That's why I said that. So the paperclip maximizer, its just sole job is to make as many paperclips as possible, and then eventually it realizes that it can start killing humans because they're made of some of the same things that paperclips are made of. It starts mining out the planets and doing all this stuff and yada yada yada. So what is implicit in this scenario is the question. What is implicit is that a computer program can at some point get to conceptual level knowledge. That is the part that I reject. They don't state that step, but it's implicit, because for it to be this all-powerful, all-knowing fucking computer program, it's got to have a conceptual level intelligence. It has no other choice but that. So they need to show somehow, which they've never even attempted to do because they have bad epistemology, how on earth this computer program is able to gain free will at some point. I don't see how that's possible. Maybe I'm not rejecting. To be clear, I'm not rejecting outright that I'm not saying it's literally impossible for silicon to ever have something where it's got free will. I see no specific reason why it would be the case that neurons could generate free will as an emergent property, but silicon couldn't. Sure, maybe. But we already know so fucking little about the specifics of how free will emerges in humans, that it's not. I'm not just going to take on its face that if you just keep throwing more parameters onto a linear equation, that eventually you get free will. Like, I'm not just going to accept that on its face. Like, that would have to, somebody's have to do the work.
That doesn't seem to be how free will emerged in humans, for sure. It's not like it's just that like nature kept throwing us more and more parameters, and then eventually we discovered, we can think and we can form concepts now. That doesn't seem to be how it played out. So I don't see why. It doesn't seem to be a metaphysical impossibility. It's not like it's a contradiction to say that silicon or any other artificial resource could gain sentience. But yeah, exactly. You're right. It's certainly at the very least a long way off.
There is one point in their favor here, which is that language is definitely very important for concept formation. And like it was when humans developed language that we developed concept formation along with that. So there is something to large language models, to be clear. But nobody's actually done the work to show how specifically they're going to gain free will. Like I don't see how that's going to happen.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it is at the end of the day just catastrophizing, and people are I think people are innately scared of new technology. This happens with like literally everything. People get scared of the hypothetical worst case scenario for what might happen with some new technology, and that's just a silly way to look at the world, I guess. Like, why not just allow people to develop the technology and see where it takes us?
Yeah, too many people reading Dune. That's what it is.
100%. That's probably just about in terms of like the actual Trump executive orders. I mean, we've gone off topic a fair bit here, talking about other stuff, which is perfectly fine. I probably don't have much else I wanted to touch on in terms of the specific executive orders. So, I mean, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep chatting about stuff, or are you keen to like finish up? Like, what's kind of your timeline?
Nah, I'm good to finish up right now. I would only want to go for not much longer anyway. So yeah, good to stop here.
Yeah, cool. Well, we might as well leave it there. Well, yeah, sweet. Well, thanks for having me on, Zulu, as always. Take care. I'll chat to you again soon, man.
Absolutely. I'll see you later, I guess.
Yep, sounds good. See ya.
And boop.